be talking Seinfeld tonight. We have our second all-time guest star, Nick Sperdute, coming to us live from New York City.
Oh my god!
Yeah, the home of Seinfeld and various scenes that they shot there, including a lot of really bad Kramer guys that sort of look like Kramer. If you watch back to those episodes,
it seemed appropriate to bring you on for this one, man, because you have a really great background in improv comedy. You and I have talked Seinfeld more times than I can count.
6. I'm just 6 times.
I loved a couple years ago. I saw that you and your fellow Nick, Mr. Paloy, went and checked out the actual set, the pop-up set that they had, and I thought that was super.
We did. It was great. I mean, it was very fun. I got to look around the makeshift apartment that they put there, and yeah, it was a great time. Got to do the Kramer entrance, all that good stuff. Although they were very cautious because I don't think the door was very strong, and I think people were being a little too much like Kramer and breaking it, so they kind of only let us walk through slowly, so it really didn't have the same effect.
Yeah, I'm sure a ton of people were trying that with how popular that was.
Yeah, a ton of people. But it was fun. I enjoyed myself. I got to do the George photo shoot, too. Those pictures are out there somewhere, probably.
They had a George photo shoot?
Yeah, you could lay on the couch like he does in the episode.
Like whenever he's laying on the couch?
Yeah, laying on the couch. Took my shirt off for it, and they did let you, if you wanted to go boxers, that was an option too. I don't think I did. I don't remember exactly. That whole time was a bit of a haze for me. I was in my boxers a lot, so I don't really remember. But I don't think I did.
When the world is only the worse off for it.
Probably, yeah. Or better.
Yeah, looking through at the history of the show, it's had a really profound impact through the years. I mean, it's probably, I would say, at least one of the top 2, if not the most famous sitcom of all time.
Yeah, well, it was regarded widely as the best for years and years, and I think The Office took a little bit of that once that got its whole run in. But yeah, I mean, it was always my favorite as a young person, still is to this day.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because it really was born out of the friendship of Jerry and Larry David. They pitched it initially to NBC as how a comedian gets his material, but it was very clear that, like, as the show went on, that was, like, not their real intention for the show.
Yeah,
that was a gimmick to help them get it sold.
I think that was always the idea. It just that it finally morphed into its final form, and they kind of realized that aspect of the show wasn't necessarily what made the show so good. Eventually, it was just the relationships between the main 4 characters, and they all had their own very unique personalities. So it was a little bit more focused on these friends living in New York, and not those friends, but friends living in New York, as opposed to just one comedian and his wacky friends.
Yeah, and I think they kind of knew if they had pitched it as the aptly named later on show about nothing that it never would have sold.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly why in the episode's arc of the pitch, I think that's what makes it so funny, because they kind of played it like, well, what if we did pitch it as the show about nothing?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very self-referential show, especially later on.
Yeah, I think they largely knew what it was, like as it evolved, and like it was kind of in the same way that Sunny knew it was just a group of characters that like you loved to dislike, but like at the same time, like they're definitely like terrible people.
I think Sunny has always been just like Seinfeld minus the redemption. There's no redeeming qualities about any of their characters. And in Seinfeld, there are a few, and they're not quite it. And they're Upper West Side people. I mean, even the episode where Kramer goes downtown, it's the craziest thing in the world that he has a girlfriend that lives downtown, and he actually has to travel 25 minutes on the subway to get there. That's how far it would have, or long it would have actually taken him. But it was just such a foreign world to them that they couldn't relate to the common person as much.
Treating it almost like a long distance relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he gets to Avenue of First, and remarks that it must be the nexus of the universe, because how can a street run into itself?
That almost reminds me of the one episode too. What was the one? The Elaine finds the opposite Jerry, the opposite Kramer, and the opposite
Bizarro.
The Bizarro Jerry. That's it. The Bizarro Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that one memed so many times. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very fun idea at the time. Just the idea that they all have these opposite characters. I mean, I assume they were drawing on, I mean, I know they were drawing on Superman, but I feel they were probably drawing on Star Trek and some of the others that have done that before. But it was just definitely something to see this generous, good-sided version of those four characters, and then us further coming to terms with our despicable group. There's a great line in that episode, even where I think Elaine is talking and George wants to join them, and she goes, "Oh, we already have a George." I always really like that.
I also love like part of that episode is like it kind of shows like in different parts of the show. It's like they give everybody chance to be the center of the group.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in that episode, Elaine very much was like the centerfold of what was going on.
Yeah, they definitely worked on an A plot, B plot, C plot structure, and every member got an A plot at some point. Kramer less, I think, but definitely George, Jerry, and Elaine got a lot of A plots.
Yeah.
With Jerry getting the most because it was his show, and it makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because I think, not that he doesn't work as well, but I think that the other characters of the show are just slightly more interesting than he is. So, like, when they do get more time, I do think it draws more interest.
Well,
especially
I mean...
because George is basically Larry David.
Yeah, I think it comes down to Jerry wasn't an actor, never claimed to be, still doesn't claim to be to this day. He was... His quality and draw in the show is that he can really deliver a joke, and he's really good at it. And he can really deliver a line, and it sells when he does it. It's great. But when it comes to any sort of actual acting in the show, it relied on three of maybe the greatest talents we've seen as far as sitcom acting goes ever. I mean, one of which may be the greatest sitcom star we've had in our lifetime, maybe with Ted Danson up there. Speaking of Julia Louis-Dreyfus,
yeah.
I mean, just think about her hits and like what she's been able to do. I mean, between Seinfeld and the Old Adventures of New Christine and Veep, and just having such shows that relied on her natural ability and her just magnetism.
She's had like 3 big top hits now just with those 3, but then on top of that, she's now part of Marvel and kicking around.
Well, now, those were just sitcom specific, but yeah, she certainly expanded from there.
She even had a really great comedy hit. What was it? Enough Said, with one of the last movies that James Gandolfini did. I mean, the two of them were a dynamo.
That was Melissa, or was it Melissa? I'm sorry, Hall of Center. I remember her last name more than her first name. That was a really great hit, and she just did You Hurt My Feelings with her as well. That I saw in theaters. Yeah. And I enjoyed that as well. She can play all of that. And Nicole Hall of Center, that's her. It always slips my mind. But yeah, I mean, yeah, she can lead a movie. She can lead a show. She just really has some of the best natural timing of anybody. Also, she has a podcast, which is freaking great if you haven't heard it.
I don't think I knew that, actually.
I didn't know that either.
Interested. I gotta check that out.
Is it just like the Julia Louis-Dreyfus? Or no, I'm sorry.
It's a great show. It's called Wiser Than Me. They did the first season. I think there was 10 episodes of it, which I've listened to all of them. It's about her talking to older women than her, and people that have had more life experiences or different life experiences, including, I mean, she talks to Rhea Perlman, she talks to Jane Fonda's the first episode. I mean, she has some really great friends. Fran Lebowitz is a great episode. She does a really great one with what's her name? Darlene Love, the singer, and
wow.
Diane von Furstenberg. I mean, the fashion designer. She had they're really interesting episodes, and she's just herself on there, and it's really nice. Yeah, she can do it all, this woman.
What is the key, you think, to like what made Seinfeld work so well? Was it just like if it never existed, could it be made today and still be as big, or was it a thing with just?
Oh, it definitely could not be made today. At least not the same way that it was. I would say that it wouldn't be able to be made today.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a different world and structure we're in now. I think what made it work so well at the time was it felt real. The characters felt real. A lot of the plot points felt real.
I also think it was way ahead of its time. Like there was nothing that had been done like it before. At least
Yeah.
not in that style and fashion.
Yeah, they were ripping off a lot of stories, like one after another, that were the writers' inspirations and things that happened to them in real life. So it felt relatable. And yeah, the situations could get zany, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I think that it was just a fun group of friends. You wanted to be involved, and the storylines, just the writing itself. They were telling jokes like no one had told jokes on television, because they were jokes like you and I would tell, as opposed to jokes that you would see on a typical sitcom at the time. Just like big gags and big punchline jokes. It wasn't that sort of humor.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've heard it a couple of times in regards to like reviews and stuff on the show, and like deep dives on like the philosophy. And it's like the way that it's written, it's like you do often most of the way that the characters build through the course of the series, and just the way each episode kind of unfolds, you do kind of feel the fifth member of that group.
Yeah, or at least you want to be, because you're so invested.
Because they are just so day to day. I think that's why Sunny does, even by their own attributing to being similar style of humor, but I feel like they both shows kind of get down into that hyper focusing on the unimportant mundane thing.
Yeah.
Each of these characters gets so obsessed with seemingly just the most, every other normal person would just move past like whatever the thing is that they just get so obsessed with in whatever episode. And I feel like there's a certain level of absurdity that just lets you kind of slow down.
Well, it's relatable. You get bothered when the way people eat, or the way people speak. That's why Curb Your Enthusiasm did so well too, because it was that same sort of thing coming from Larry, where this idea of, hyper-focusing on mundanity and just really bothering with the crap that typically you wouldn't bother with on a TV show. You might bother with it in real life because it's in front of you, but you wouldn't have to deal with it on a TV show, because they look for a specific plot that makes it feel bigger, and that wasn't the point. It was about trying to make things that we all deal with and focus on the absurdity of them.
Yeah, and one of my all-time favorite stories from the show, and I feel it kind of pays tribute to the fact that the show had such a big draw to actors at the time, were very talented but not very known in a lot of cases. It was, you had Anna Gunn and Bryan Cranston coming out of the woodwork, and they all later on became super famous. But I think one of my favorite stories from behind the scenes of the show was one of Cranston's first appearances on the show. Jerry goes to see him in the capacity of a dentist. I think Cranston shared this on Conan or something. He was lurking around the set trying to work out his mannerisms, and he said one of the lighting techs nosed into what he was doing and said, "Hey man, you should like take a huff of the gas," in the middle of it. And Cranston actually worked it into the bit. And it's one of the funniest things in the show, because he just huffs it in the middle when he's going to be working on Jerry's face.
Yeah, it's a brilliant moment. There's a lot of little things on that show that made it so good. I mean, you're talking about guest stars. I mean, they had so many guest stars that were just, at the time, not as well known, but Patton Oswalt was on the show. I mean, Courtney Cox was on the show. Denise Richards. I mean, people that were Mariska Hargitay. I mean, so many names that would come later. James Spader was on the show. I mean, just, Bob Odenkirk. I mean, it was crazy.
So
Sarah
good.
Silverman. I mean, just a mass group.
Yeah, there's the talent and draw. And it was not even just the fact that they had cameos of these people who you see a million times over and over and over again, but they always would come in and really bring their A game to like this unique voice of this show. That it was, how do you project this style on someone? But after a while, everybody really did start to get it, and people who did come on had that Seinfeld language of all these different hyper quotable moments. Like the show really did develop its own voice in terms of style.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. One of the things they talked about doing that I think also brought people in was that they used a lot of real things at the time. They used a lot, if they were going to talk about a bank, they would talk about a real bank that exists. Chemical Bank is a real bank that existed. They would talk about the names of real restaurants and real brands and everything. They didn't care. And I think I remember hearing Larry David talk about it, and just, I mean, using a Major League Baseball team, multiple Major League Baseball teams, and just using, how often do you see that in shows? Half the time, if they're in movies, they're fake, or TV shows, they're fake. They don't get the permission, and they didn't ask for permission. They just used it. And at the time, it was the biggest show in the world, or it was getting to be. And so they were, well, I guess great. Glad they're using us. They got the owner of that team in the Bronx. I don't like to say their name because I'm a Red Sox fan. But they got the owner of that team to actually film scenes to be in the show. He wasn't good enough,
which is insane.
So they didn't let him in. And then
they did actually. Yeah, there are several scenes.
Okay. You can watch scenes. There's a scene I think with him and Elaine. She was supposed to be his date for something, and they actually had him film some things, and Larry David had to tell him that it didn't work out. And he was just, all right, tell me straight. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. And he just had to tell him, but sorry, we went a different way. And then it was Larry doing the voice for the rest of the series, and it became one of the funniest reoccurring things.
Yeah.
Part of what I watch the show for in rewatches every time is just to pick out in the background dialogue when Larry is like
all the Larry David characters. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them.
So good, so freaking good.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. Even his visage. I mean, he's in there a whole bunch of times too.
Yeah, he's the Coast Guard guy that picks them up the one time, and then
I think
he's the man in the cave.
Yeah, I think George tries to exchange a $20 bill. It turns out it was the $20 bill that he drew the lipstick on, and he said, "I'm sorry, we don't accept bills of lipstick on the president." That was him in the thing. Yeah. He's everywhere.
So good. Oh, also there's from the voice cameos too. The marine biologist episode. Every time I hear it's him saying, "Is
anybody here a marine biologist?" Yeah.
Well, that's every time I was to say if I'm out golfing, not that I golf, but I'm always like, "Is that a Titleist?"
That's a really good introduction to something, by the way, Matt. When I'm out golfing, not that I golf. When I'm out skiing, not that I ever go skiing, but when I do,
I have literally never been skiing. But
I'm bad at it. I'm bad at it. Mostly people invite me to feel better about their golf game. I mini golf, okay, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's a pity invite.
Matt, I bet you're shit at that too. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, a couple drinks, I might be okay.
If we're going to lay it on the table here, I bet you're at that too.
I haven't been golfing in God knows how long.
I won one free game in my life. I'd say that's doing pretty good.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. It's on your Tinder profile, isn't it?
It is. Hey, you'd be surprised. You've
hit him. You've hit on his Tinder profile, haven't you? If you know that.
I did. Yeah, I swiped right. I was into it.
I would too.
Oh, Jesus Christ, this guy won a free game? Mini golf? Holy
free
hell.
Game? Damn.
Imagine how he is in the sack. Wow.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But back to the show. I'm just kidding. You, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, back to Seinfeld and why we're talking. But I always found it interesting how George is kind of an amalgam of just Larry David real world stories.
Yeah, well, and Woody Allen. I mean, he was playing Woody Allen at first too, and you can hear it more in the original Seinfeld Chronicles, the original pilot, Sans Elaine. And you can hear that voice, and you can hear him, and you can see his mannerisms leaning a little bit more toward that direction. And I think one of the best moments that wasn't a Seinfeld moment, but was on Curb when they had the whole cast, and you have George trying to teach Larry how to play. There was a moment off camera where he's trying to teach Larry how to play George. And I think that's a really great.
I love that moment.
Yeah.
Talk about universes colliding on themselves.
Yeah. Worlds are colliding.
Yeah. And killing independent George.
Oh man, how about the whole thing with the Susan storyline?
Hold on, I want to get back to Matt's mini golf. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yes. All right. No. What would you like to know? Because we got time.
No. I'm all good. I bet you're great. What's your handicap? No,
free parking.
The Susan storyline was absolutely lunacy, and the fact that was put in season 4 especially. I mean, that's just next level writing. The lead up, the build up, everything.
I would kill to be like a fly on the wall in their writer's room because they had to have had total chaos going on.
Well, I feel like a lot of them were in the writer's room, and then Jerry and Larry would just kind of go off by themselves and write. revise and change and make the show what it was. And they had their own office across from each other. They would sit and desks facing each other and just kind of put it together.
Yeah, and it was clear they definitely had final say, but they didn't use that as a stonewall. They let a lot of other ideas get through to the end.
Well, it's funny, too, because you can tell the seasons when Larry wasn't there, because there were a few where he left, and towards the middle of the show, he left. And you could see those seasons and the humor that Jerry liked more, the things that Jerry would let in more. There's a lot more like little repartee and a lot more kind of silly banter back and forth. Just old gags that he would put in because he found them very funny that Larry wouldn't always let go in the first couple seasons, because Larry was the one really who had the final say while he was there.
Yeah, because he was kind of like the main driving producer for us. Jerry handled as much as he could, but I mean, he was, spinning a lot of plates, as it were.
Yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus has said it multiple times, and one that I particularly like was her speech to receive the Mark Twain Award, and when she talks about them just killing themselves to make that show what it was, and then once it got even more successful, they worked even harder to keep it and to make it the show that it became after that.
That's one of the things I've heard too. Is it's easier to get it's easy to get a successful show going, but not easy to keep one going. It's like
I don't think it was easier. I don't think it was easy either way. I mean, if you ever hear about the talks of them at the beginning, I mean, it was impossible to get it to be what it was, and then once it became that, and the world started to accept it, and everybody started to love it, then it became also just that much more difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
Which I think is,
you got to give them credit for going out on a high note when they did, and I think it does lend itself to that credit of the one moment in the show.
Yeah, they were the number one
when George he just keeps walking out of meetings on a high note.
Yeah, that's right. He's doing the Jerry Lewis. I mean, I think that it was a very clear. I mean, Jerry's talked about it. It was the number one show on television when they decided to end it. They could have went 5 more seasons if they wanted, or however many more, and broken records and whatever else. They could have broken the record before Sunny broke the record for most consecutive seasons by a live action sitcom. I think Ozzie and Harriet was
they
the
very
one
much
that
could have
held it
written
before
their
that.
own ticket for sure.
Yeah, and now Sunny doesn't look like it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. I do think another thing that's lent to the credence of the show was it was one of the last iterations of the live studio audience. Not very last, but I think it was greatly benefited by having it because they got real genuine audience collaboration, and it wasn't just a laugh track laid over to tell you when to laugh. It was like they were getting genuine laughs out of their audience, and it does feel natural. And I think there's something robotic about a laugh track in a sitcom when it's just meant to kind of guide you.
Yeah, I mean,
to laugh. There's something genuine when it's live.
Yeah, there are a few shows off the top of my head I could think that are really hard to watch for me, just based on that. I won't name them.
I'm waiting to hear a bated breath.
Yeah, but those shows. But I'm not gonna. No more.
They suffered from it greatly. I can cut that out.
Yeah, terrible. I mean, they're not good shows, and it's because the humor wasn't what everybody would be laughing at. It was what they thought you should laugh at.
Yeah, and that's very fair. I mean, there's when you're faking it's noticeable.
Yeah,
the material sucks.
Well, it would have to especially be with comedy too.
Yeah, for sure. It's weird to me because I've thought about this a lot. It was also the look of the show, because for some reason, even though it was in an apartment, there was something about that show most of the time that it just doesn't look like any other sitcom. And I think it was because when it was in Jerry's apartment, it was very limited. It wasn't, we weren't moving from room to room or from apartment to apartment. It was either there or it was somewhere else. It felt very, the word's escaping me, but it static, as opposed to being incredibly loose and moving, and you're going from the kitchen to the living room, and then we're going outside and everything else.
It's also kind of from whenever they would shoot any of the other rooms in any of the apartments, they would never use a master. It was always either a tight 2-shot or a single. But you would never really see the whole room except for very small key instances where it was absolutely necessary. But pretty much anytime they were just in the center of the apartment, you were looking at the full master there.
That's absolutely true. I mean, it did feel like it was shot that way specifically, and at least maybe incidentally, but
And I feel like it lent to the iconic nature of what that apartment looked like, and most of the locations on the show.
yeah, they were great locations. I mean, they really worked so well. I mean,
Since we're on the subject, though, I do find it hilarious that there's an architectural impossibility in Jerry's apartment.
There is?
Yeah, going from that with that angle of the hallway.
The kitchen would be in the hallway, and it's only noticeable because I got the Lego set a couple years ago, and I started looking at it. I was like, wait a minute. So when I had it right in front of my face, I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
I have to look this up. Never.
Yeah, so I found it funny because I watched that show for how many years, and then it hit me. I was like 29, I think, when I first realized that.
Well, I will say that is, I think, a testament to how New York apartments are built. Because it's about the most realistic looking apartment I think I've seen in a television show too, sitcom wise too. It was a very realistic living in New York apartments. I'll tell you, that's about as close as it's close. I think the thing about it was so clearly didn't look a soundstage where they built an apartment onto it. It felt more like an actual apartment, which I think maybe is what did a lot of it.
It had that lived-in feeling.
Yeah. I mean, even the restaurant, the diner where they would go. I mean, that also felt monks. It felt like it was a real New York diner, and they really set it up in a way that it worked.
Yeah, and their exteriors too for the New York streets. I know they did occasionally use certain things, but I mean, they shot a lot on LA sound stages for those, and I fall right into it every time. I don't even doubt it half the time when I'm rewatching it, and I know full well that it's not.
Yeah, well, they also built them a street at some point on the lot. I forget whether it was fourth or fifth season. I can't remember when, but once they got a budget and they actually built them a full street on the lot, and I think that helped as well. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much New York, just a lot cleaner. Because if you come here now, it's a lot of filth.
I haven't been to New York in a while.
I was up there not too long ago. It's a sight for sure.
I mean, it's an amazing place. I'll never live anywhere else if I have the option. But yeah, sure. There are certain things that you just really get used to that people when they first come here are not used to. And that's pretty obvious.
Yeah. In terms of the language of the show, too, I always found it hilarious how they got around a lot of FCC restrictions in what they were able to joke about because they would often say without saying. It's kind of I'm trying to think of a great example of it.
Well, I mean, the whole episode of the contest, I think, was a very good example. And
that's probably the best example.
Which, I mean, managing to never say the word masturbation for a whole episode about a contest about masturbation. To be fair, when I was a young kid, I didn't know what the fuck it was about, really. I thought it was kind of just about having sex. I didn't realize that was the idea of it. And then the little older I got, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So much of that humor went over my head when I watched that show as a kid.
I like, too, the late payoff for that. I don't know if did they ever decide when they were doing that episode who was actually going to win the contest, but then decide, let's yeah, he wins, but you don't find out, I think, until a season later or something when he's doing the hand modeling and someone's afraid that he might get too into his hands. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think when they're sleeping at night, there's an indication that it could have been him at the very last bit. But I don't think it's totally decided in the episode.
Implied, yeah, and the whole John F. Kennedy Jr. thing in that.
Yeah, well, because you never see George break. You see Kramer break right away. Hilarious, amazing moment. Then Elaine mentions that she broke, and then you're seeing Jerry right as he's about to break with the woman across the street, and then I think that but you never see George. You see George getting there with that nurse at the hospital, but they never really know. But it's a lot more obvious that all three of the others did.
Yeah, no, thinking about it too. And Brian, you mentioned it earlier, but yeah, some of the stuff growing up, I didn't appreciate it more as I got older and I started rewatching it. But I would always remember my parents watching it, everybody talking about it, and be like, "What is this? I don't understand." But years later now, I completely I get it, especially for the time. Some of the things they were touching on, the humor, and how they were doing it.
I mean, my uncle and aunt, my uncle George and my aunt Cheryl, her brother and sister, they I know really loved it. And then my grandmother got on board and she became a massive Seinfeld fan and watched it all and everything. And that was and a little after that, I got into it. But my parents were never fans. My father only ever, I saw him, if he'd walk in when I was watching it, he would only laugh at Kramer, was pretty much it. Kramer's the slapstick.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean, the physical comedy, which was just next level. I mean, when he's having the fucking seizure, I can't tell you how hard that fucking is to commit to that bit. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah. Michael Richards was so strong in that show.
Yeah.
And how they found all the parts for that are they're just as good as they are. I'll never fully wrap my head.
Well, yeah. I mean, amazing auditioning, I guess. I mean, really good casting. But yeah, eventually it became pretty clear.
And I think they had a good casting process too, because they in the pitch episode they make it seem it's so terrible.
Yeah.
But the guy, I can never remember the guy's name that they cast in the show for Kramer.
Oh, yeah. I think he was the guy who actually auditioned for Kramer in the first place. He was an initial auditionee, but yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and then they have Jeremy. Didn't he audition for George? He's the guy. He plays the guy who auditions for George, and he totally nails it.
Yeah, and George doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised that they didn't do a Larry David play and just have Larry David come in.
Yeah, that wouldn't have surprised me either. That would have been a funny choice. But I don't think at that point he wanted to act, really.
Yeah, he doesn't. I don't think he really appears in the show up until that point.
Not much. There's just a few. We talked about the few moments where he's playing very random, very far between little scene characters.
Yeah,
and it's mostly his voice. Yeah, I always forget when I watch the show when certain storylines start, and I'm always surprised when certain ones start later in the series. I mean, Festivus doesn't come until the last season.
Yeah.
And
I know, right? That blows me away every time.
It's crazy the big some of the big things from that show that didn't come till the later seasons, and you're like, wow, I thought you would assume that they would have been so much earlier, but
I'm just thinking now of like, man, almost every episode that I can think of there's just so many little things, those mundane things that are so quotable now and just have entered our pop culture. I'm thinking, the Junior Mint, when George doesn't want to give his code at the ATM. The guy's stuck in the ATM and there's a fire and he wants the code. The Marble Rye. I mean, the list just goes on, and it's like, wow, I never really appreciated it even until I think just this second, the amount of creative effort and work that went in to doing this.
And all of it's just still prevalent in culture. Like people just quote, like not even quote it, but they've almost become like vernacular.
I mean, double dipping, I think, was an initial Seinfeld thing. I don't think that was really talked about before that or much, if anything, but then the idea of double dipping, which has become such a normally talked about thing. And I remember even as a kid,
you dipped the chip, you took a bite, you dipped again.
Yeah, just anything like that, where it's just still surprising that it just came from this sitcom. I mean, I don't know if It's Not You, It's Me was really that much of a cultural thing before this.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, I'd have to look. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy. I mean, they could take anything they wanted and blow it up, but a lot of it was their own stuff.
Okay, I was just going to say, I've always wondered if you did do it today, or rather not even have the show today, just to have the Seinfeld characters air out some of the things going on in our world today, with how would they make more jokes about the internet or dating now in today's world, things like TikTok, stuff like that. I'd be curious to see how those characters would interact with it, assuming they're out of jail after the end of the show.
Yeah. Well, they're only supposed to be in there for a year. I do remember there have been several spec scripts that I've seen over time that people have done more modern takes. But yeah, it would be interesting with the mind of Larry and Jerry actually doing it. But we see a lot of that stuff in Curb, which is the blessing of Curb.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of great that we were gifted that after the finite ending of Seinfeld. It's kind of like you get a little taste of what more Seinfeld.
Yeah, even the episode where they do the Seinfeld reunion. I mean, that's a very clear. It's a much more where are they at now sort of feel.
Yeah, and I think it was smart of them to do it that way, because I don't feel they could have done an actual Seinfeld reunion that wouldn't have felt hokey or whatever. But the perfect way to do it is just as a little bit blurb and Curb.
Yeah, I think you have to give them a lot of credit for lasting through the pandemic and not doing it, for the amount of things that came back and sitcoms included and did reunions of some sort. I mean, Friends did a reunion type thing. I mean, I know that Will and Grace did several episodes or several seasons of a newer version of the show, that sort of thing, and they didn't. They didn't bite, which I think was a good choice.
They would have made a ton of money from it.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, but I think it was the right choice not to.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, you have something that good where there's only probably 2 episodes of that whole series that I'm not a big fan of. Certain episodes I'll watch less, but certain 2 that, like, I never really liked the Puerto Rican Day episode, and I never really liked the last episode that much. And those 2, between those 2 episodes, that was 9 seasons. It was 180 episodes, and there were 2 that I'm not a huge fan of.
What's the Puerto Rican Day? Is that the one where it goes backwards?
No, I like that episode. It's the episode where they go to India. I really enjoy that episode. One of my favorite parts of that episode is George talking about having a stomach ache, and he's like, I don't know, it might have been something I ate, and then they cut backwards, and he goes, I'll take the Clams Casino. He goes, really? And he goes, yeah, chef recommends. And I just really love that.
I always call that one Memento before Memento happened.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. It was one of the only times they only ever had a gimmick to an episode. They didn't do that much. And then sitcoms really would do that pretty consistently after that. I mean, if you watch the amount of of sitcom trope episodes dating back to the fucking Flintstones with Fred having to go to 2 different places at the same time, and the amount of times that's even been done, where one character is going to has to go to 2 different dates or 2 different situations at the same night and everything, and wearing different outfits, and it always ends in a catastrophe or whatever. There's so many episodes like that in other sitcoms, and not just that specific thing, but episodes that are very clearly using scenarios set up from sitcoms past.
I think a lot of modern sitcoms just have a roadmap of episodes to draw from now, whereas back in the early 90s it was slimmer pickings for you had to kind of come up with some more original ideas.
Yeah, and I think some shows have come up with original ideas, but I do think that occasionally they beat them to death. I mean,
no, absolutely. Like, there's shows that stand out.
Think about the paintball episode in Community, and they did it how many times, or
so good.
The Halloween heist in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then they did it how many times and kept trying to make it fresh and different because the first ones were so well lauded and enjoyed.
Well received, absolutely.
Just a few examples, but it happens a lot.
Community is a great show.
Community is a great show. I mean, Jim Rash as the dean is one of my favorite sitcom characters ever, and he's phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, Andre Braugher as Captain Holt is another one of my favorite characters ever on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So I mean, they have an amazing show and a lot of really great things in them. But yeah, occasionally we get to a point where it's like, okay, you've done this episode now 5 or 6 times, and no matter how you spin it, it's still very clearly a repeat.
Yeah. And I think part of what made Seinfeld unique too was it kind of broke the writing format of a lot of sitcoms at the time. It was typically you had a show, it would do an A and a B story, and then B would come back, and it was pretty formulaic. You could kind of predict how it was going to happen. Whereas with Seinfeld, sometimes there was an A and B story, sometimes there was just an A story with the whole group, or sometimes there was an A, B, and C story, and you don't even come back to the A story. It was kind of did its own thing and played by its own rules.
Well, some of the best Seinfeld episodes follow a pattern. They do, but in fact, we were talking improv. There's a very specific improv style called the Herald.
Yeah.
And it's this style in which you have 3 scenes, then you have a group scene, and then you have 3 more scenes, and then another group scene, and then you have the very quick third beat. And the third beats are a lot of times dragging and mixing things together from the other scenes. You have 1A, 2A, and 3A, and then you have 1B, 2B, 3B, and then you have the third beats, and they can be 3A, 3B, 3C, or they could just be an amalgamation of all of the other things. Bringing it all together is oftentimes what makes it so good, and you're following the game of each scene. There's a lot in Seinfeld that is some of the best episodes. I mean, we were talking about the marine biologist episode, maybe the best episode, if not one of the best, one of my favorites for sure. And that plays a lot with that idea as well. I mean, bringing and connecting the Kramer and George storyline at the end, and it's that sort of, it is those episodes that really get talked about as ones that were, I mean, you look at the Soup Nazi episode. I mean, the Elaine storyline mixes with the Soup Nazi storyline, and then that's the big finale, is her getting the recipes from his armoire that was stolen earlier from it's because she had one stolen earlier, and Kramer was involved in that, and then it's a pretty.
I guess a lot of times it does kind of pull a lot of things to a head at the very end.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the point. Was kind of okay. I mean, not every episode's like that, but some of the more talked about ones, some of the ones that are bigger in popular culture as far as just theme and what they were able to do, were because of that.
Yeah, it was setting up multiple jokes that all have the same punchline at the end.
Yeah, and you talked about not connecting with certain formulaic sitcom ideas. They didn't do that, but they really blazed their own trail, and they did a lot of episodes that were, I mean, look at the parking garage episode. They did an entire episode in a parking garage. They did an entire episode in a Chinese restaurant that was just them in this restaurant talking and waiting for a table. And that's a very early episode. It's the ones that they did kind of break the mold on.
I think that's one of the first ones that broke their concept. I think was the Chinese restaurant one.
It was.
It was. A lot of people come back to and talked about that one because I feel like that was where they really struck the iron.
Yeah, I think the thing that made Seinfeld so rememberable, for lack of a better term, or still talked about, is that when they broke the mold, it was done with a real intent, and it landed almost every time. I mean, they really did things that hadn't been done, but found their own way to do them, and have been copied but not perfected since. Really,
yeah.
I could rant about this show forever. It's got so many things about it that made it unique.
Well, there was even that time just recently, Brian. Remember just Jerry's stupid little thing during the Red Dot episode with the sweater?
Oh my God!
I
think you and I probably. I think we obsessed over that for had to have been like 2 years.
Yeah, because I would just say this thing when someone would say stuff to me, and my answer would be, ask me a question, I'd be, I don't know. I don't know. And I was like, it's in Seinfeld. I swear it's in Seinfeld. And we couldn't think of the episode.
We must have watched the show straight through back. I literally bought the show on Vudu just to watch it to find this. And he and I were losing our minds. I don't know what episode.
You should have just called me.
Show like 3 times over since we started talking about it.
You should have called me. I would have told you in seconds.
I should have called you is what I should have done.
I would have been of course.
I can't tell you how many times we sat up until like 3 a.m. watching through trying to find it.
Yes, but I was overjoyed when I did finally stumble upon it. I didn't realize, again, it was earlier on. Nick had mentioned, I thought it would have been later. I was focusing on, this has to be maybe season 5 or later. No, this was season 3, I think. It's the cashmere sweater, and there's the one flaw in it.
Yeah, because George wants to buy Elaine a Christmas gift, and
she got him the job. She got him a job.
He wanted to buy her a Christmas gift, and he saw this cashmere sweater, and they were going to give him it was a big discount because it was a red dot.
Cheap man that he is.
I think the beauty of that too is if you watch the show, you can't see the dot.
No.
Yeah, that's the funniest part of it.
You can't see it. It's there.
And I love the line that Jerry has whenever George keeps asking him, "Can you see it? Pretend you didn't know it was there." You know what I see? I see a cheap man trying to get away with something.
That's where you get the great episode, the great whole bit of Elaine trying to use reverse psychology on George.
Yeah.
Jerry told me that
she tricked you.
Did this. And he goes, what did you tell her? He goes, I didn't, you stupid idiot. He tricked you.
I know so many people that try and use that bit in real life too.
Yeah. I mean, it's tried and true.
I guess so. So what are your some? If you had to pick one singular episode of Seinfeld, I'll start with Han. Han, what's your number one go-to favorite?
You know what I think my favorite is? I think is I get them confused, but I think I want to say it's the theater episode is my favorite. I don't know why. It's where they're all trying to go see one movie together, but they're not all playing. One's playing in the other theater, and George keeps he keeps having to use someone else's ticket to get in because he can't find his stub. I think that just because that's, especially then, that was something that can happen a lot. And even still, if you go to the theater, maybe not so much because things are digital. But yeah, I think that's one I always, if that's on, I will watch that episode constantly. Yeah. I think, is that the one too where Kramer's friend is bootlegging too, or is that a different one?
That's a different episode.
Yeah,
the
I
one
think
you're
it is
thinking
that
of
one.
is I think the movie is what it's called,
Is it called? Okay.
because they're all going, and then the Checkmate is the other film. They're all trying
Yes, Checkmate. Yeah, they're trying
Yeah.
to see Checkmate, and I think Jerry ends up seeing.
that one dick worker won't let George go, even though he saw him a bunch of times.
Yep. Yeah.
I think he just lets Kramer in at one point.
Uh huh.
Yeah, that's
And I
funny.
think Jerry ends up seeing Rochelle or something with his comedian friend at the time in the show.
Yeah, that's also Jerry's also trying to get to multiple stand-up gigs,
Yes.
and he keeps missing his slot. Yeah.
Yes. So that would be one of mine.
That's definitely.
What's your favorite?
Yeah.
The one with the bootlegging, I think is that one. I think it's called The Little Kicks. That's later in the
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Yes, that's the Little Kicks one. Yes.
finally film Elaine
Yeah.
dancing.
Yeah.
You think that her dancing came in season 8?
Yeah.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah.
That is crazy.
So Brian, do you have your favorite? I mean, I know mine already, but
Mine was, if I'm forced to pick, I have probably 10 that are my favorites, but if I'm forced to pick one, it's probably Marine Biologist.
yeah, I mean, it's a great episode. It's not a bad choice. I mean,
That finisher, that ending monologue by George is so good.
yeah, it was written on the day, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was
The Kramer storyline coming through with the Titleist and
yeah.
It's another good example of I think anytime George's lying is like a central point of the show,
Yeah.
I think that it was some of the best gold of the show.
Yeah. That was season 5, I believe. My favorite episode came a little bit earlier. Is it my turn? Can I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. Shoot.
It was season 3, episode 5. I remember because I watch it so often. It was The Library, my favorite.
Yes. I love that one.
Because there is nothing better than the library cop going to Jerry's apartment, Lieutenant it was the Bookman, and it was Philip Baker Hall plays it, and that scene is my favorite scene in all of Seinfeld. That scene where he goes into Jerry's apartment and he just dresses Jerry down. He's like, maybe that's how you get your kicks, you and your good time buddies. I mean, it's just, I don't know what kind of music you listen to. Rock was never my bag. But you put on a pair of shoes when you walk into the New York Public Library, mister. I mean, there's so many. It's my favorite.
Yeah, that episode, they nailed that one.
Yeah.
Like you said, that was fairly early on.
And George is fine. Sees his old gym teacher, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, with his baked bean teeth.
Oh, the Keith Hernandez. The other one I would probably choose if I was on the fence between it would be the Keith Hernandez episode.
Which one? The first one?
The one where it's also Jimmy and Elaine's Jimmy's name.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sell the shoes with the jumping.
Yeah, I mean, Keith Hernandez was a really crazy guest star as well, to have him on multiple episodes as just a athlete coming in to play a character, and he did a great job, nailed it, and just playing himself, which was super fun.
Yeah.
I'm Keith Hernandez.
I'm Keith Hernandez.
I love the JFK one too, where they use the second spitter.
Yeah.
With
that's
Second
the episode.
Spitter,
Yeah, that's the first one. Yeah, that's an amazing moment too. The whole
made even funnier because Wayne Knight is actually in JFK.
Yeah, and it's great because they take several scenes from the film and parody them like they did Midnight Cowboy in another episode, and they did it a few times in the show. I mean, they had when Jerry's father gets kicked out as president of the condo board, I think, when he gets impeached, and that whole like Nixon walk away and the music. I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Choice. It's what got me to watch Midnight Cowboy the first time. I'll tell you that the episode where they do all that stuff is the reason I watched Midnight Cowboy for the first time. So, which is a great film. Yeah, great New York film.
I loved how it wasn't even just popular movies and stuff that they referenced. They even pulled in just notable news moments.
Yeah.
And like they grabbed the OJ Bronco thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That Kramer. Like there was just little moments that they just.
He wants to see his fish. I'm taking him to see his fish. Yeah, just brilliant stuff.
I think you hit it on the head when you said there's only out of 172, 190 episodes.
180.
180. I was close. I was in there. That there was only
ballpark.
2 that you didn't really like. So that's just a testament to this treasure trove of of storytelling.
It was only really the last couple. They just didn't feel like the show to me because the first one was mostly in the line at the parade, and it just doesn't land for me the same way. And the last one was just really not in New York, and it felt it. But I mean, even the ones where they would go to LA, it felt like a show. The last episode just felt different to me, and in a lot of ways, and formula felt different, and But I'm not here to complain about the finale because that's been done enough.
I do got to give an honorable mention to the Label Maker episode because I just remember Kramer and Newman playing Risk. Yeah, and them playing Risk throughout that whole episode.
Oh my God, so good. I think, Nick, when we were in college, we had the Risk boards going.
Oh, yeah. I loved Risk. I still do.
I feel like that was partially inspired by the show because we kept just kicking plays going, just in between classes. We had a board going for weeks.
I mean, it might have been. I mean, it was definitely, I bet that was something that got popular from the show, too.
Yeah.
The game of world domination. I have a Risk board right here. I can see it from where I'm at.
Teetering on annihilation. It's a great show, and I think it'll endure for years and years to come, especially now that it's kicking around the streaming services. They change the contract every couple weeks.
The popularity goes up and down. I mean, it gets into the zeitgeist every once in a while for whatever reason, similar to The Office, where it just peaks and valleys now that it's not on, but it's because of the quality of the show it was. It will endure, like you said, and it'll just keep coming back at different times. And I think it's the greatest show maybe ever made.
I'd have to agree there.
Yeah, hard to argue with.
Well, boys, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on, Nick. I mean, dude, anytime you want to be on, this was a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah, well, you let me know when you want to do a podcast about Wings, the TV show, or any various or Will and Grace, or any various 90s sitcoms that I know a lot about, or Star Trek, or anything else. I'm your man.
Well, we got to do a Star Trek one.
Absolutely, man. I'm down for Star Trek.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate you. I love you. I miss
you too. Yeah.
I'm just blacked out. What happened?
I'm blacked out. Dad.